an improvement that lasts 5 years with a 20-year lead, and you want to make sure you match those things up. So there's a bunch of others in there. I raised those because as you start to think about programs, you should recognize that there's a lot of work going on in programs right now and at the federal level to sort of create a structure around this that helps that can be both helpful but also provide some limits that can sometimes be painful. Okay, so as you start to then implement, as you start to move forward to say, okay, this is great, maybe even advance in the law. You say, let's get going, let's get ourselves together, let's be ready. You got to build a team. You got to figure out, you got to make sure you have the right lawyers in the room. And you've got some great lawyers here who are already working on it. You want to make sure you have a finance team in place. You have a city team. You start to build your city team. Who in the city needs to be part of this? You need finance folks, legal folks, program folks. Just to make sure that as you get started, everyone's on the same table. This program covers a bunch of silos that normally don't interact in cities. So one of the things we found over and over again is you got to get the groups together in the right way, whether that's through the mayor's office, the city manager, or administrator's office. Find some way to cohesively bring folks together, because otherwise they're not talking to each other, and this touches too many different people's stuff for that to happen. You need to do that. If you're a city and the county collects taxes, you need that interaction. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff's got to help. You can do your own administration. You can bring in somebody like us to help. You can finance it with bonds, you can do interim, you can do that. We'll talk about a bunch of stuff. You need to start build your team so that you're ready to move, both inside and outside. The legal authority and structure, Craig's going to talk about the great work that's been going on, and the senators work here to get legislation in place. Once you have legislation, once you see what the legislation is, it's not over. You have to figure out what is to take that legislation and actually implement it in the city. And actually, we've been surprised how often that's a problem. How often people go, well, geez, I don't know. How do I do this? And I think it's good to start now to make sure you have a full implementation plan to get things rolling. The administration application process, and this is work that obviously we do, sometimes cities and counties do themselves, and I want to talk about this mostly in the context of actual programs. But this is difficult because you have to marry up the expectations and timelines and worlds of contractors and property owners and underwriters and tax collection. All these various things have to come together. You have to have a regulatory and quality assurance scheme. You need to make sure you're protecting consumers. At the same time, you want the program to be easy and people can come in and make it quickly. You need to do all the underwriting, all the stuff I just mentioned. You have to check. You have to check all of those things, and you have to tell people when they didn't get in. And you have to market it. You have to talk to people to figure out how you're going to communicate with them and with contractors and property owners. And it's got to be not too expensive. And this is a trick, because it's actually a lot of stuff on a very small project. You have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 projects. You have a lot of work to do on each one. So how you do that is key. I'll talk about some of the ways we're doing that in different communities, but that's just a thing to keep in mind from the beginning, is you'll end up, if you're not careful, spending an arm and a leg. Sir?
Do you have any twin cities kind of groups that you're working with already? In regions? I mean, is it always just a city, or do you counties, or are there preferred regions or sizes that matter?
That is a great question. And the answer is, it is great to go and join together. I mean, there's the political and other legal dynamics, but I'll show you what we have are individual cities doing their own programs. We have counties and cities the cities within working together on programs. We have multi-jurisdictional programs working together across boundaries. So what we have is all of those things. And it's really about, look, in general, big is good. Bigger gets you bigger bonds. It gets you better, more diversified financing. It helps you with infrastructure. It also makes it harder to get things started sometimes. You got to coordinate more folks in more places and more governments. So there's a trade-off as you look forward, but I think the answer is you can set that in a lot of different ways. And that's part of a process you want to start. If you have a community that says, hey, we're ready to go, well, nobody's stop them because you can do it. If you wait for a year and we'll have these other cities that come in, well, that's not maybe a good answer. But the general rule is if you got a group that can go together and you have some different things, that's great. I think if you can put some people together, it helps. Get you the economies of scale that make this work. On the financing side, look, there are some different emerging models around it. But the key thing here is that generally municipal financing finances big projects like paving roads and sewers. And PACE is little itty-bitty projects that you need individual seamless financing over time. How do you, it's a square peg and a round hole problem. So the emerging models are really around the aggregated or pooled bond issuance, which is like Boulder County, where you get everyone together all at once, they all sign up, they get liens, you issue a bond for everybody, you hold the bond, and then you issue the money as people complete their projects. The interim financing model, sometimes called a micro bond model also, is where you get a pool of funds. Either the city creates a pool or private capital money. And you have that pool of money, and as people finance projects, you just pay for them. And then you essentially think of it as buying a bond in tiny pieces over time. You're creating a pool of bonds, and then you can sell that bond later once it's at a big enough size in order to pay off the, to replenish your pool or to pay down your lines of credit. And those are really the two emerging models. As I said, under interim, you have city or county funds like in Sonoma and Palm Desert, either because they're providing the funds directly or they're guaranteeing the bank who's providing the line of credit. Or you have purely private capital, like Berkeley, San Francisco, San Diego, Santa Fe. Some of the programs, these are usually programs we're doing, where, for example, we can provide initial capital and work with underwriters and others to figure out the bonds. Or we work with banks, local banks. Again, a lot of this is about partnerships. So we work with underwriters, we work with local organizations, local banks, and many of these places to put together a package that makes sense for that community. So there's no perfect answer. Everyone has their pros and cons. More people are moving towards interim financing because it provides a more seamless experience for property owners. But it's just a question of design and working through how the, and what gets you the best rates and all those things. But in all of these things,